Howdy, folks, and welcome back to another Nerdstalgic episode with me, your host, Luke, the Ginger Bookworm. As always, I hope you're doing well. Hope you're feeling good today. Today's going to be a fun one. We're going back to a series that I did a couple episodes ago, that I started, shall I say, called So I Finally. Just to give a recap for anybody who didn't watch that episode, who doesn't know what I'm talking about. The So I Finally series that I've been doing is for things that I finally got around to playing, or I got around to watching or reading, that sort of thing. So I finally did it. That's the kind of concept behind it. So the first and last episode I did on this series was a Peacemaker, and I explained about Peacemaker season 1 and how I enjoyed it, and things I loved and didn't love, that sort of thing. Because how long it took for Peacemaker to come out in the UK, I thought I'd start with that because I finally got around to watching it. That's how it works. So today, it's something different. It's not a TV show today. As you can see from the title, it is. So I finally played Dying Light, the first one. I haven't played the second one yet, and I probably won't for a while, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about me finally getting around to playing Dying Light, my thoughts, my feelings. Did I like it? Didn't I like it? You know how it all works. A deep dive sort of review into my experience with Dying Light. So yeah, introduction out the way. Let's get to it, shall we? Let's delve straight, deep, filthy, disgusting, covered in blood and guts. Let's get into this, shall we? So before I get onto the review, to get onto my feelings, let's start with the actual company behind Dying Light, Techland. I've been a fan of Techland for years. I think the first game of theirs that I actually played, which was another zombie game, was Dead Island. I absolutely fell in love with Dead Island when I first played it. I was coming off Dead Island from Left 4 Dead. That Left 4 Dead was the first proper zombie game that I played with friends that I enjoyed. And if you ever played Left 4 Dead, you will know how great that game is, especially to play with friends. It's creepy and scary on your own, and it's still creepy and scary to play with friends. But it's one of those sort of experiences that when you play with friends, you can have a laugh, you can have role play, like a lot of my friends do. Whenever we play a game together, we do follow the story, but we tend to role play, mess around, go fast, go slow, depends on, where the mood and the giggles take us, really. Especially with Left 4 Dead 2, there was so many giggles and that, and so many things that we role played and messed about. It was just fantastic. But coming off Left 4 Dead and then going on to like a sandbox world full of zombies, and you are a survivor, and you're on an island, and you've got to basically figure out what's going on and basically figure out how to escape. So my introduction to Techland from Dying Light was incredible. I had many fond memories playing it with friends. Recently, me and a friend of mine, we had bought. Well, say recently, it was last year. We bought Dead Island, the collection. So you got Dead Island 1 and Dead Island Riptide, both together in one remaster collection for the Xbox. So we've been playing through that. We played through Dead Island 1. We had one hell of a time, a lot of laughs. Currently playing through Dead Island Riptide, or technically Dead Island 1.5, because it's not specifically Dead Island 2. There was going to be a Dead Island 2, but I feel like I don't think Techland's doing that anymore. I think it's either Jaeger or Saber Interactive. One of those gaming companies I think are doing it now. Apparently, from what I've heard in rumblings, that it's still coming out. When and where, I don't know. Hopefully, at the summer games this year, maybe for Xbox or even PlayStation, because there's no E3 this year, sadly. So hopefully, some gaming expose will show Dead Island 2, maybe. Fingers crossed, we'll see. But yeah, I've played a lot of the Techland zombie games, and I loved them. And I think one of the last games I played of theirs before Dying Light was that, because they did Call of Juarez, which was like a linear FPS first-person shooter. Well, I think one of them was third person. I'm not really sure. I didn't play them all. Cowboy Western sort of series that they took over, and one of the last games they did in that series was Call of Juarez Gunslinger. If you want a cartoony comic book style Western with jokes and silliness, that's the one you want to play. I played through it twice, because each time you play through it, you get upgrades, and then you can play through it again, and you go back, you go in it again with your more upgrades. So the first time I played it, I was quite tepid. I didn't know what I was doing. The second playthrough, with all my upgrades, I knew what I was doing. I was a gunslinger. I was pepper. I didn't miss a shot. It's only a short game, but generally one that I recommend. The reason I start with Techland is to kind of give you an idea that they have their roots in other games as well as zombie games. And after they had done Riptide, they had basically decided that they no longer wanted to do the comedy, jokey, silly zombie games. Because Dead Island 1 and 2 were both, well, Dead Island 1 and Riptide were both serious but not serious. They were very jokey. They were very much like, yes, you're on a zombie island, yes, it's scary and quite creepy and dangerous, but you can have a laugh as well. And it was all about having a laugh with your mates. So Dying Light was more of an idea of, we want to be more grim, we want to be more gritty, we want to be a bit more realistic, and that's where Dead Island comes into it. And it came out 2015 and blew everybody away. I remember 2015, I wanted to play it, but it took me years and years to actually get around to buying it. I didn't buy it till last year. I don't know why. It's just one of them games of us, like, at that time, I think I had fatigue. I was so fatigued about zombie games that if you're a fan of Angry Joe, you will know his sort of concept behind the whole idea of, hey Joe, do you want to play another zombie game? And he's like, kill me. That was basically what I was like around about 2015. It was, zombies were everywhere, and it wasn't just Call of Duty. It was, you had constant zombie clones that were just trying to do zombies because it was popular. Like, there'd be games that would add zombie modes just because zombies. You know what I mean? It wouldn't make no sense to the concept. They would just put zombies because that's what was popular at the time. So I got really, really bored of the undead. So I didn't buy it, and I saw the reviews, and everybody was coming out saying it was amazing, it was incredible, and I was like, one day I get around to it. Years and years later, I eventually got around to it in 2021, and this is where we are today, 2022 now, but 2021 I got it, and I put it in, played a bit of it for about an hour or two, got scared, and I stopped. Honest truth, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail near to the end, but I basically got halfway through and I was like, no, this game's scary, I can't play this, turned it off. I know it sounds pathetic, doesn't it? But it's true. I got scared and I was like, no, and then I was like, oh, I've got other games I need to play, I'll play them. I'll play them first, and I'll get back around to it. So I kept trying to avoid it. I kept trying to find other games to play. I kept trying to find other sort of excuses of, I've got to go play this. Oh, I've got to go do that. Oh, what was that? Okay, I'm coming down now. Turn Xbox off. And it's kind of funny, but how when I finally got around to playing it again, how my thoughts and feelings of the whole scariness behind it really changed the more I played it. Which again I will get onto as we go along. But what Techland were able to do here was generally incredible. I'll get onto the story in that, but overall I did enjoy my time, and I wasn't going to do this review at first, if I'm being honest, because what they've done with Dying Light, well, the first one, is that there's so much content, it's hard to finish it all. Like, I'm still doing some of the quarantine zones that it's kind of like mini dungeons, you can rerun them. So I'm still doing those, even though I've ran them loads of times. I'm going in and they're getting harder and harder and harder. So I'm still doing those, as well as all the extra add-on stuff that you get for free, as well as the stuff you pay for. You've got the huge expansion, the following. So my plan was, well, I was going to play the game a bit more, play more of these small little paid sort of expansion things, and then I was going to play the DLC. Then I was going to do a big review. But from looking at all the reviews, all the things that people have said about the following DLC, that is in its own Dying Light game. So I figured when I finally get around to playing that one, which I hopefully sometime soon, that I will give its own review on that and kind of judge it separately, because even though it's part of Dying Light, it's technically it's its own game because of the new mechanics and new things they added into it. So I just decided that I was going to talk about Dying Light in a whole on its own, and then when I get around to doing the following DLC, I will talk about the added on stuff and all that. So as we get into it, we're going to start off with the story, characters, main character, and what I thought of the narrative. So that's what we'll get onto next, shall we? So the premise for the story is it's quite your at first it's your quite standard simple sort of zombie outbreak. Um, the story's set in in the city of Iran, and they're getting ready for the 2014 Olympics when a virus breaks out in the old town, and that slowly sort of seeps into the slums. And as a cautionary method, as you would imagine, quarantine and lockdown came in trying to contain the virus, and very much like Raccoon City, Resident Evil 2 sort of thing. So they put huge barriers around the whole town. They cut off the slums and the old town, so no cross contamination, even though the infection spreads either way. They blow up all the bridges, and they've just stuck, and they're trying their best to contain this sort of virus. So what the game does, and what I love about the game, is that it sets up the narrative perfectly. The world building in this, I'm not talking about the story part. I'm talking about the world building itself is incredible. One of the things that I love about this game is that before you even get to the start menu screen, it gives you an introduction to the world. It gives you a cool little animated sort of cinematic, which is white and orange, and it just opens up the world fantastically about what happened, how it's spread, and how Haran is now basically shielded off from the whole sort of world, and the GRE, the oh god, Global Response Initiative. I think that's what they stand for. I don't think it's actually ever really. I don't think it really goes into what the acronym is, but that's what I think it stands for. Will kind of makes sense for. I'm just making stuff up at the moment for that one because I don't know. I can't remember if it gets mentioned or not. But the GRE are basically trying to figure out how can we not just contain it, but how can we also um, get a cure. And that's where your character comes in. You play a character called Kyle Crane, and you are sent in by parachute to Haran to find the survivors, gain their trust, and try to find a cure for this virus. Try to figure out what happened and why. So that is your job as the character. And the world building itself is fantastic. You drop into this world. You have a small little cutscene in the game where you land, you make a lot of noise. If you make noise in this game, it attracts zombies. So the zombies are instantly trying to attack you. You get bitten. A survivor comes down, saves you, but in turn, that survivor ends up getting eaten. And then you get taken away by the what's it called, the survivors, and they basically bring you back. And as kind of like a nod and thank you, would be like, we brought you back. They send you on small little quests to kind of help them out. And as the beginning, and as the story starts and the world building, the beginning is quite interesting. The beginning is quite good. It does a fantastic job of not just setting up the world, it sets up why you're there. The who, what, when, where, why. You know, who are you? Carl Crane. When are you? You are in the midst of a infection. It's who, what, when. I say who, yeah, who, what, when. Get my words out. Right, start again. Right, the who, Carl Crane. The what, zombie infection. The when, Haran. Why, to find a cure. The who, what, when, where, why. They nail it perfectly. To kind of give not just the player, but to give reason to the world, to give reason to, like, this is why you're here, this is kind of the setup. So the world building in itself is fantastic, and I will go on to the architecture and how the world sort of plays into the gameplay in a minute. But the world building in the narrative spec works fantastically, and the beginning of the game does a fantastic job of introducing you to the parkour system, to introducing you to the combat system, and basic crafting. And then from there, they kind of just let you loose and be like, right, here you go explore, don't get eaten. And that works fantastically. What doesn't work and what falls down for me is the story, and the characters. You see, I don't really remember any of the characters. I remember what happened, but I don't remember any of the characters' names. I don't remember the bad guy. I don't remember anything really in terms of what their motives were. All I really, really remember, and again, it's not that long ago that I played that game. Like, I completed it last week. I think it was on Saturday. So quite recently. But I can't remember. And the reason I can't is because I was never given a proper incentive to care for these characters. And you would think I'm in a zombie apocalypse. I'm in a lockdown city that's in quarantine. Zombie undead are everywhere. I should care about the few survivors that I meet. But I just didn't. The dialogue didn't catch me. The narrative didn't catch me. I was just it felt like they were talking to me, but it didn't feel like they were talking to me. It was like they were talking through me, if that makes sense. It was kind of the idea of, we need you to go here to go do this, and I was like, okay, why can't you do it? You know, and it wasn't just the fact of me being lazy. It was just more the fact of, well, you were just there. You could have done it while you were there. You know, it was constantly like I was the messenger boy, so there was no reason for me to really care. And like the game really tried to make me care about any of them, but I didn't. You know, like there were moments where I was like, oh, that's a shame. I wish that person didn't die, or I wish that didn't happen. But because it happened off screen and I didn't get to see it, or I wasn't really always involved, it was much like, oh, okay. Like there was one moment where there's this one character that you really, really sort of have affectionate for and you love, and you see in your mind that they change and they die and they become an undead and become infected. And you would think at that moment the game would allow you to, you don't want to, but it's that moment of just like, you know, you have to fight. They're no longer the person that you once knew. They're now undead. Their soul has left their body, so they're no longer that person, even though in your mind they still are. So it would have been nice if the game was like, you know, now you have to fight your friend. You've got to kill your friend and then have a cutscene. But instead, it's much just like, it's just a quick cutscene of just like, your friend jumps and he tries to bite you, and you go, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and then you break a neck. And I'm like, oh, you know, that's quite brutal, and it's a shame, but I would have liked to have been involved. You know what I mean? And that's what it feels like this game. Anytime there's a moment where it feels like I should be, as the player, involved, I'm not involved. You know, it's more just the fact of, I go to a place, cutscene, I'm not really involved. I'm just kind of a ghost. I'm here, and they start to talk to me, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I walk out of a room, I'm back in the game, and I don't see any of them ever again. You know what I mean? It's like I don't see them do anything. I don't see them fight. I don't. The only one time that one of the characters really joins me in a fight, but I was too busy, you know, defending myself and defending my life to actually take notice of that other character helping me out. Um, but even then, that was short lived, because only a couple moments later, that person then dies. So it's just like, you know, so I'm not giving any attachment to any of the characters. And that's just the characters, that's the people that I meant to care about. Then you have the villain, and the villain is very route one, boring. Well, I want to say predictable, but it's not really predictable villain, because the reason behind the villain's plans and ideas to be a quote unquote villain make no sense. So apparently this guy worked for the GRE. They sent him in before me, and he basically realized the plan of what the GRE were trying to do with the virus, and kind of like Umbrella. If you know Resident Evil and you know the Umbrella Corporation, you can pretty much figure out where I'm going with that in terms of the GRE and what they want to do with the virus. But so he basically figures this out and figures, wow, screw it, life's crap. You know, there's nothing but chaos. It's always chaos. Very preachy, very much a very evil version of Ian Malcolm. Very preachy, um, and he basically just decides, screw it, I'm going to become a warlord, and that's what he does. He becomes a tyrant, and none of it makes sense, because your character, as you play for the game, you too figure out what the GRE want to do with this virus, what their plans are for it, what their plans are for the city. And you do see certain moments where the GRE and the government do really heinous things. So they do moments where they blow up people, you know, blow up buildings with people in them, and they try to carpet bomb the city while there's still proof of survivors, because they want to cover that up. You know, so you can see that they're evil. But I know people are different, and people's concepts and personalities and moments of pure stress and like fear because they might die in and I've never been in a zombie apocalypse. I don't know about you folks. Maybe I might be a tyrant if there was ever that moment, but it just didn't make sense how when you, the player, when I found out what the GRE were trying to do with the virus, I instantly didn't go, or even Kyle didn't go, oh, well, I'm just going to turn evil now. And what, well, no, I'm going to stop them from killing all the survivors. I'm not going to sit there and hoard all the all the answers and all the supplies and basically become a warlord and a warmonger. I'm going to um, help people, and that's basically what Kyle does. So that on its own makes no sense as to why the villain does what he does. And also, the villain has many moments where he could have killed me, and I know it would have been a short game if he did, but there are moments where he just lets me escape. He lets me leave, and I'm like, are you not going to at least try to get me back? Are you not going to at least, it's kind of like a relationship. Are you not going to at least try to fight for me? I'm right here. Kill me. You know what I mean? I'm kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger with the Predator. I'm like, come on, kill me. I'm here. Come on. I can't do the accent, but I'm like, come on, kill me. And he's just like, he does. there's there's a moment that generally made me giggle. There's a moment where like there's again a cutscene. I wasn't involved in this. Where he chop his hand off, right? And I'm running away. Again, he has his men around him with guns. Any of them could easily just pop me in the head, and that's it, done. But he goes, no, 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 give me that. And he gets like this burning torch, puts it to like his stump where his hand used to be, and he goes, Crane! And I had to laugh because it reminded me of from Star Trek, where you had Captain Kirk, and he was like, Khan! It was that moment. I just giggled because at that point I didn't take him seriously. It was at that moment I was like, I can't take you seriously anymore because I didn't take you seriously as a villain anyway. But at that moment, I was just like, I just don't care for you. And like, as you go through the story and as you go through like the side quests, none of it really adds into him as the villain. You might see a few more of his men, but as the game goes on, as you get more sort of powerful, his men become something of as well. They come as much as zombies. They just become as fodder, something that you've just got to get past. Something you've just got to you come in, you chop them up, and you go to the next one. Like it's not difficult. And that's the thing with the game is the fact of things become less terrifying, things become less scary the more powerful you get. And again, I'll get on to that sort of as we get on. But in terms of the story and the characters, I couldn't really relate to any of them. I didn't really care, and I should do. This is the thing. Like I'm in a zombie apocalypse. I should care about every single one of them. I should care about the survivors and me wanting to help them and wanting to save the day. But I didn't. I more so. I had more fun with the side quests and going back and forth and just doing. I don't. I'm a fan of busy work. I love A to B busy work in video games because it gives me time to embrace myself into the world, embrace myself into the mechanics and what I have to do, and try to figure it out in my own sort of pace. So by the time I come back around to doing the main quest, I'm a bit more of an expert in terms of doing certain things, about fighting, about running, jumping, parkour in the terms of this game. I'm a bit more versatile, I'm a bit better at it, and that's kind of the point of a side mission. That's what a side mission should be, as well as being an entertaining, interesting sort of side mission. And some of my most favourite sort of parts of like Dead Island were the side missions. The main quest was fun on its own, but me and my friends had the most fun with the side missions, and they gave the best rewards. And it's the same with this game. The side missions were the best, and even in games where side missions are boring, I still like doing them because that just gives me time to put an audiobook on, and I'll listen to the audiobook and I'll just turn the sound down on the TV until I sort of need to turn it up and actually pay attention. But with this one, I didn't feel like I needed to do that. I enjoyed the world and I enjoyed everything about it. It was just the main story for me that kind of brought it down. Um, I didn't care about Crane. I didn't really like the character I played. I didn't really get an attachment or emotion to him. It was more just the fact of I knew my assignment. I knew who I was and what I had to do. My job is messenger boy. Go from here to here, kill this, kill that. Um, and that's it. And sometimes maybe getting a cutscene or two and having to kill a friend or take on the bad guy, but I don't really take the bad guy on. Like it was funny. There were boss fights, right? Only a few boss fights. One of them was a zombie that I remember, and then one of them was like one of the main bad guys henchmen. And because at that point, because I'd done so many side quests, even when they gave me basic weapons, they didn't allow me to use the weapons that I had. Had to get, because obviously I would have been too overpowered and I would have killed the boss incredibly quickly. Um, but because of that, they gave you like a standard sort of blade. But because of my upgrades and because how upgraded I was and how much of a high level I was by the time I was getting to these main missions, that in a few hits I was killing these bosses and I was just running through them. I was just running a train and all of them. And even with at the point it got to the game became so easy because I was playing it as it was meant to be played. I was not doing the main quest. I was playing the side quests. When I would get a new side quest, I would go off and do all the side quests in that area. Then I would carry on with the main quest. But it felt like the main quest wasn't prepared for me to do that. Because when I would go into these missions, I'd be so overpowered that I would just run through them and they would be over so quickly and I'd just be off again doing more side quests. So at that the story kind of got a bit boring for me, got a bit stale because it's so quickly that I was just able to run through things. And then added on to the boss fight at the end, which is not really a boss fight. You know, I finally get around to the boss. He's in a high-rise construction building, and you got to work your way up these stairs. And it's kind of like I don't want to say the raid because the raid is a far better sort of movie sort of example, but I have to use it in the best sort of context. You know, I have to work my way up all these flights of these stairs in this tower block of killing zombies, all different types of zombies, and it really sort of, there's a lot of parkour involved. You know, there's a lot of open spaces, so I can just grab zombies and chuck them off the building, or Spartan kick them, or drop kick them. You know, so it takes all the skills that you've learned playing the game and kind of brings up in a high-rise sort of tower. Like any moment you could trip and you could fall off the building yourself, so you got to be careful. So that was kind of fun. That was interesting, and it kind of made me use techniques and combat features that I didn't really use in the main game. Like, for example, you get given a grapple. So if a zombie gets too close, you can grab them and chuck them over left or right. And it was kind of the idea that there'd be spike traps everywhere. So you just grab a zombie and you sling them into a spike trap. I didn't do that. I didn't really use it till the end of the game. When I was on this really high building, I just grabbed enemies and just chucked them off. Because it was just easier. I found an area that you could stand on, and I just stood there, and zombies would come to me, and as they'd come to me, I'd grab them and I'd chuck them off the side, and I just did that to a good sort of 10 to 15 zombies, and I moved on. That was just one small section, but it was just like I could go in and chop them all up, but I'm just going to stand here, let them come to me, and I'm just going to throw them off the building. And it was fun, it was silly, but it was fun. But I got myself pumped up. I tried my best to pump myself up for this huge, what I assumed, a boss fight at the end. And it turns out it wasn't really a boss fight. It was a quick time event. It was like a cutscene where, like, he's going to attack me, and I've got to quickly press A, or I've got to quickly press Y, and I've got to press X or B as quick as possible. And you do that, and then he gets you, and you stab him, and you have this whole sort of quick time event, and then eventually it ends, and that's it. The story's done. So it's not even a proper boss fight. It's a quick time event, and it was really deflating. I was just like, oh, okay, really? All right then, fine. It was a real bummer. So overall, the story in itself and the characters didn't pull me in. What pulled me in, and what kept me playing, and what kept me interested, and what made me have the most fun was the world building, was the narrative in the world. How that, like I said, Haran was in the middle of having an Olympics. They was getting ready for the Olympics, and apparently they had done a few Olympic games, and they had a few of the Olympians there at the time when the outbreak happened. So some zombies are dressed up as like runners. They're dressed up as like Olympians. They've got like the shorts on and I'm not really sure what it's called. It's like the tube top, tank top sort of t-shirt. There's signs up for the Olympics and everything. You can see, especially when you go into the old town, which is like the city part. There are a lot of signs up, and there's a lot of things up in for the race. So that world building's there, then to kind of bring in that narrative a lot more is there. And then when you go into the slums, the narrative is great there, where you can show that they were getting ready for the Olympics there, and they were getting ready for um, having new guests, and there was a lot of tourism brought up, and there was a lot of fishing and signs going, "Come here, do this attraction," as you would see in an Olympics. And it was just interesting to see this world building as I was going through the levels, to see how this city was ready for a huge onslaught of people for the Olympics, because as you do, the Olympics brings in a lot of tourism, a lot of money. So a lot of towns and cities, they kind of get themselves ready for that new inflow of cash, inflow of people. Little did they know that inflow of people would soon be undead, raving zombies, and that they would be stuck in an apocalypse. But it's a great setting, so that's what kept me going. It was the narrative world building. It was just looking around, seeing things, and be like, "Oh, that's cool. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's interesting." That is what kept me going, really, as well as sort of the gameplay mechanics and the parkour, which I will get onto next. But the story in itself, it doesn't work for me, and I feel like from looking at reviews from other people, it was the same. A lot of people sort of came out and said that the story was either lost on them, or the story wasn't that great, and that a lot of people played it in co-op, and that the co-op was the reason why um, they kept playing, was because the game's inherently fun. Even though the story itself isn't great, the game itself is inherently fun, so you want to keep playing because you're having so much fun, even if the story is pants. And that's basically it here. The story itself is pants. The villain is one note. There's not much to the villain. It's a very sort of a wet blanket. There's not much to it. Um, like the example I used last week, for a 343. It was a sponge cake with no flavor. It was just it looked nice on the outside, but when you really got into the depths of what this villain and what this story was, there wasn't a lot of substance. Your job assignment was to go from point A to point B, and that's it. And yeah, you make your own story from there. And it just didn't work for me. Um, so that's the story. That's the character. That's the world. Main character. Not great, but the gameplay itself was the fun part, and that's the bit I'm going to get onto next. So we're going to talk about the gameplay and how good it was and how fun it is to keep you into the world that they're trying to portray here. Now onto the fun part, onto the part that actually, like I said, kept me engaged, kept me interested. The whole part of why this game has stood the test of time and why it was still enjoyed and played and supported for so long, and because of the fans enjoying it so much, and why the sequel was took so long to make, is because they wanted to improve on this one core feature, which is the parkour. The parkour is what makes this game fun. I'll be honest, when I first started playing, it was a bit hard to get used to, because I'm so used to jumping being A. Whenever you play a game, it's like a law in gaming and game design. A is jump, B is crouch. Maybe X is if you want to slide, you hold down B. You know what I mean? And X is to interact, and Y is to switch weapons. That sort of thing. But in this game, RB, the top bumper, is to climb. And at first it's a bit weird, because I did die a few times, because I had to retrain and rewire my brain to not press A when I jump. Or even to jump off a building, because many times where I would just run and press A thinking I'm going to jump, and I would just run straight off a building and die. you know, and it was annoying at first, but it eventually got funny. And it was that moment of like, okay, I've got to start being serious now. I've got to sort of really sort of get into it. So what I tended to do, there's a small area around this hub. It's this place called the Tower. Is where you go the most, where the survivors are. But around that building, there were a lot of slums, and there are a lot of sort of buildings that you can easily sort of train to kind of run up to, sort of climb up and jump off. And so I did that for a while, just getting myself used to constantly pressing the RB to jump. And after a while, as the game went on, I got a very more proficient at it. And as my upgrades got better in the terms of me being able to upgrade my agility, which upgrades my parkour, I got better. I could climb, like I could get perks that meant I could climb up buildings faster. So when I jumped off a building, instead of having to take forever to climb up, because in this game, when you're getting chased, every second counts of trying to how quick you can traverse the map, how quick you can run, jump, slide. And so especially by the end of the game, I was a proficient parkour free runner. I could jump from building to building, jump off buildings, jump into bags of trash. I knew the map so well. I knew where certain things were going to be. I knew if I jumped here that there would be a door open here and there'd be a window open here, so I could jump off, do a barrel roll, slide into the door frame, go through the house, jump through the window, jump on a building, climb up, run. You know what I mean? Like I knew the layouts of the world, and that's one of the things I love about the world building here, because it's not just a narratively. The world is not built just for the narrative. The world's also built for the gameplay, for the functionality of parkour, especially when you get to the old town, which is the final part of the game. When you get to the old town, it's, as you would imagine, a lot of buildings. It's a city. There's a lot of buildings, a lot of apartment blocks that are very close together. So, but I didn't really go on the ground. I think most of my time was spent on top of roofs, jumping from roof to roof. Especially when I unlocked the grapple, you get like a grapple shot that you just slung out like Spider-Man, and it hooked on. You whipped close to the buildings. At that point, I got lazy because I was just doing that to buildings. But I only did it if I knew I couldn't make the jump, because I enjoyed the parkour so much. I actually didn't use it a lot. Like at first I did, because it made things a lot quicker, but it got boring. You know what I mean? It's like zip lines are great, but you use zip lines enough and you're like, oh, zip lines are fun, but I kind of wanted to climb and run and jump, because that mechanic is so much fun that I didn't want to use the grapple hook so much. I didn't want to zip line so much if I didn't have to. I wanted to traverse myself, going from building to building, jumping, going through buildings, going up, climbing up buildings, jumping down into trash, running down on the street, then climbing back up a building. It was like being Spider-Man. That for me was the fun part of the game, was the parkour. That's what made it the most interesting. Um, and then adding on to the weapons, you get your standard sort of zombie sort of weapons. You get your clubs, your mallets, your hammers. Then you get your big sort of two-handed weapons, like a big piece of rebar with concrete on it, or you have like a two-handed battle axe, or just a normal axe, or like I found it was an Easter egg that you could find. It was hidden away. I cheated. Obviously, the game's old, so I know where all the best weapons are. But kudos to the first bloke who ever found it, because it's very hidden away. But hidden away out in the middle of this little ocean sort of lake area, there's a rock formation, and you clump on these rocks, and then hidden away at the bottom is a dead body with a giant longsword in it, and Excalibur, and you got to hold down X, and you've got to wait a minute, probably a minute and a half, with holding down the X button, and then you pull Excalibur out. And I didn't get it till the end of the game, because I kept forgetting to go there, because again I was having so much fun and doing all the side quests. So by the time it came to the end game, when I got it, I didn't use it. My planning is, when I eventually get around to playing the DLC, I will use it then. But I enjoyed my time with my weapons. I enjoyed finding blueprints and unlocking new weapon mods. I will say this though about the weapon mods. They were fun. There were some weapon mods that were fun. As you imagine, you could put like fire on your weapons, and you could put electricity on them, or you could have one that was called the bad hangover. And basically what it did is that just the presence of having that weapon out, you didn't even have to hit a zombie, would make a zombie sort of throw up, and would make them sort of glow yellow. And then all the other sort of zombies that would go near that one zombie would also get infected, and all the zombies would just start to throw up. It wouldn't kill them, but it just sort of give them it would stagger them a lot more. So I ended up using that a lot when I had a big crowd of zombies, because me being there, they would all start puking, and I'd be easy to be able to get in there with like chopping their heads off, chopping limbs off, while they were all sort of distracted, throwing up. So that was a fun mod. There were a few sort of mods that I found that were generally like insane, but the very root ones that you go for, like the the more legendary and epic ones, were fun. But it was sometimes you needed a lot more parts, and the problem is it was just having to go around scavenge for the part. You could do it, like all the buildings were full of supplies and scavenging. It was just having to spend the time going out and finding them, and I was more so focused on wanting just to play the story, play the side missions. So I didn't go off and get the most epic legendary ones. Sometimes I'd unlock them by accident, being like, you can upcraft a new crafting thing. So I went to my blueprints and noticed like, oh, I could get like a legendary mod. Because as I was playing through the game, I'm one of these people that if anything's shiny or if anything I can pick up in a video game, I'm going to pick up and put it in my inventory. Even if I don't need it, I'm just going to pick it up and sell it later in my junk anyway, for money. So this game for me is perfect because like I was like a magpie. Anything I could pick up, no matter if I needed it or not, I'd pick it up. So by the time I got to the end game, I had so much bits of scrap and supplies. I could make tons and tons of mods. I could make throwing stars, throwing axes, Molotov, pipe bombs, DIY shrapnel grenades. I could do blueprints, and I did. I ended up doing blueprints. I could make my own sort of enhancement mods. Um, but one thing I will say with the mods, even though that they were good and they were fun, they weren't on the level that you had when you played Dead Island. Dead Island, because it being a very goofy, sort of silly um, version of a zombie island, that they were more bombastic. They were more in your face, sort of big, brash, and stupid. Kind of like not Assassin's Creed, kind of like Saints Row, kind of very silly on the nose sort of things. Whereas this is more, because the world was more realistic, shall we say. The mods were a bit more contained. But that being said, I still enjoyed myself. I still did a lot of crafting, and as you go through the game, you eventually unlock guns. So I unlocked a assault rifle, a legendary assault rifle by accident. I just found it, and I just used that. But because how OP and how powerful the gun is, because literally you only had to shoot most zombies in the head and they would die instantly. Um, and because it was so OP, I didn't want to use it. It felt boring to use. That's how fun the game is. You would think, oh well, you give a player a gun, they're gonna love it, go around, and shoot everything. But I didn't. Even on the bigger, harder enemies, where generally a gun could have killed them easily, I didn't want to use my gun because ammo was really hard to find, and I needed the guns for when I used to fight the humans, because some humans at first use like sort of hand-to-hand combat weapons. Um, but as the game went on, as you got to the end game, all the humans that you met had guns, so you needed to have, a gun as well. So I sort of saved them for when I needed them, and that the bigger guys and like the hordes and hordes of zombies that I had to face, I just used to get my muzzle toffs and throwing stars. I used to throw throwing stars and grenades in the middle of them to kind of weaken the ranks, and I'd go in and mop up with my sort of like machete or something, or like a giant katana. I found a katana which was like incredible, and I just kept that through as long as I could before I had to eventually get rid of it because it just died on me. Um, but the game itself is so inherently fun that you would think, like, say, giving you a gun, you wouldn't want to use it. But I didn't want to use it because it wasn't. It didn't feel sportsman-like. In the best way to explain it, it just felt boring, to use a gun, and especially the moments where I went up against people. It wasn't even like it was a hard firefight when you went up against other people with guns, because they were all in cover anyway. So all I had to do was aim down sights, and I just had to shoot at the chest twice, dead. Shoot at the head, gone. Shoot at the leg. Oh, the animations were great. You shoot them in the leg or shoot them in the arm, and they would react that way. But the humans got so easy to kill that, like, even though it's meant to be difficult, me knowing I have a gun and that I don't have to get in a close combat fight scenario with them, that I just used to stand there, wait for them to come to me, shoot them, dead, move on. The more fun moments for me were the zombies, where I had to go into buildings and the building was full of zombies, and there'd be zombies that would pop out at you and attack you, and out a window, like you go into a room and also a door would break down as you go to walk into that room, and loads of zombies just fall out of that one room, and that next thing you know, you're swarmed, and then you had different variants of zombies. You had zombies that were like little kids, little generally like little kids, and they would see you and they would scream, and that would just sort of sound the alarm for all the horde around you to swarm you. So you'd have to run up to that kid, and it sounds brutal. And I'll be honest, at first doing it, I felt like a monster doing it, because it's like there's a rule in video games, and you don't kill kids, you don't kill cats. You know what I mean? There's certain rules in video games you just don't do. Um, but it was one of those moments where, like, I ran up to this thing and me thinking I'm gonna just be like, I knew that I'm probably gonna have to kill it, but I didn't think I was gonna have to kill it in the way the game does. So I figured it was going to be the fact of, I was going to punch the kid in the face, like knock the kid out, that sort of thing. But no, generally I had to walk up to this kid and I had to like choke the kid out and break the kid's neck. That was brutal. Like I don't. I feel like the designers knew that that would be a bit too brutal for some people. So you only face that kind of enemy, roughly, I would say, my experience, 2 to 3 times. But even that was enough. Like I didn't think I'd want to meet them many times. I didn't really. Maybe there were more chances to meet them if you were travelled at night more often. But I never really encountered them. I only encountered them during the main story. But um, they were horrible. Then you had ones that like were like big and fat, and they would like spew acid at you. They were easy to kill. 2 hits, they were dead. Then you had ones that used to run at you. You'd have the runners. You'd have the volatiles that were like the really big beefy ones, really hard to kill. They only came out at night. And then you had the big sort of monster Hulk berserker Jekyll and Hyde sort of monsters. Um, that some of them would run at you, charge you. Some of them would walk around with giant clubs, and they would try and hit you with these clubs. Uh, to be honest, for those ones, if I had to kill it, I would, and I wouldn't sort of go in hand-to-hand combat. I would mostly just like stand up on top of a car or like a building, and I would just throwing stars at their heads until they die. Not the way you meant to do it, and it took longer than it would do if I actually went on the ground and fought them hand to hand. But at that stage, I was just like, come on, just I'm gonna throw. I've got loads of throwing stars. I've got loads of supplies. I could easily make loads more. So I just throw loads of throwing stars at your head, and it'll kill you. So that's what I ended up doing for those ones. Um, but I the gameplay itself is like I say, it's the fun part, and that's what kept me engaged. The parkour was fun, running around, feeling like Spider-Man, feeling like a badass. Like, oh, I'm being chased by loads of zombies. Don't worry, I'm going to run, climb, slide, and if I can't run away, then I'm going to sort of run and drop kick that zombie off a building. It's funny, and it never got, especially drop kicking, it never got boring. Drop kicks. Generally, there'd be many moments where I would see a zombie and I'd be like, I'd run up to it and just go, ha ha, and you just see the zombie fly off the building, and it never got boring. Or even just the fact of when a zombie was too close, and I would grab a zombie and I'd sling him off the building, or a zombie would get too close and I would sling him into a spike wall, and he would just get he'd get trapped on this spike wall, impaled, and it'd just be funny. It'd be hilarious. So it was the gameplay that made the game, you know. Um, and I feel like that is the reason why this game has lasted so long, and why it was supported for so long, and why people kept playing it for so long, was because the storyline wasn't great, but the gameplay is what makes this game such a classic. What makes it so good. The part like it's one of them things of just like you never think parkour would work in a video game until you do parkour in a video game like this, and you're like, every game I want to play from now on, I want parkour in it. You know what I mean? It's generally one of the moments where I played it, I was like, once I got the hang of it, and I got so good at it that I wanted parkour in every game I ever play now. You know what I mean? It was just so much fun, and doing the Spartan kicks and crafting my weapons and making sure my weapons, like you get given a lot of weapons, like you're never not surrounded by new weapons. But I try to keep some of my best weapons for as long as possible. And as you would imagine, because I kept some of my best weapons um, for the moment that I really felt like I needed them, I never ended up using them, and they stayed in my inventory till the end of the game. I've still got them. Hopefully, they'll come in use when I get around to playing the DLC. But yeah, they never got used, and hopefully they will get used eventually. But it was just fun. It was just so much fun running around and doing the gameplay. But one part of the gameplay that is terrifying, and is the reason, as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the reasons why I stopped playing for so long, was the night sections. Because the thing about this game, they have a day-night section. During the day, there's zombies and normal sort of volatiles around, but um, as you go through the game, as you get better, more equipped, and you get better at parkour, and you unlock new perks, eventually zombies they become cannon fodder. It just becomes easy. For a lot of them, you don't even have to fight. You could just sort of what I was going to say the word pole vault, but it's kind of like pole vault, and you kind of run up to a zombie, and you jump on his head and you run over him, so you can just kind of, you don't even have to get into fights at certain points in the game as you sort of go on and get more evolved, because it just becomes a point where you're so advanced you don't need to. You can, and you just destroy them all because you're overpowered, but you don't have to, And I like that sort of that choice of, like, you can fight now, you don't have to fight anymore, because when you first play the game, fighting is generally hard and it's quite scary. But as you get more advanced, it gets better, and that's the way I felt with the day-night cycle. Because when I first had to go out during the night, it was terrifying because I was underpowered. I wasn't very good at the parkour system, and I even tried to fight one of these volatiles, and he just ripped me to shreds. Like, I didn't even get a hit off him. He was like slash 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 dead. So it was terrifying having to run away from all these volatiles. And there is one sort of story mission where you have to go out at night, kind of introduce you to the volatiles and the characters. And generally it was terrifying having to run and jump, and me not being the best at parkour, and because I haven't equipped and evolved and upgraded my perk system to actually be a better grappler, being able to climb up buildings fast enough, that I was generally looking behind me scared, like, they're coming, they're coming, they're coming. It was really terrifying, and that's what put me off playing. But one thing that kind of got less scary going out at night. It got to the point where going out at night wasn't as scary as it was at first. And it was down to the fact of the more OP and the more badass that I felt, and the stronger I felt, and the better I became at the higher my level was at parkour and agility, and the higher my survival rating was, and my hand-to-hand combat was, and that I unlocked loads of new perks, so that like I said, even with a standard base weapon that they would give me, like, even if it was like 5 damage, I could still do a lot of extra damage with it because of all my perks. So at that stage, I didn't feel terrified. And there is one sort of story sort of mission where you've got to go through this. It's like an underground motorway, sort of subway sort of system that you've got to go through. And there's a nest of volatiles, and there is a moment where they chase you, and I managed to run away. But 2 of them, no matter what I did, just kept sort of getting me. And there was a point where I just stopped and went, you know what, screw it. And I was like, come on then, let's go. I'm OP. If you kill me, you kill me. But if I can't get away from you, let's go. So I had 2 of them at a time. I don't get me wrong, they took a lot of hits, and I took a lot of hits. But at this stage, I had upgraded my health. I had tons of health kits. I had throwing axes. I had some of the best sort of weapons in the game that you could make and craft and you could find. So I was like, come on, let's go. And it was a challenge, but I did it. I took 2 on at a time, killed them. I felt badass. And from that moment on, like, whenever there was a mission that went out, said, oh, you got to go out at night, I was still stealthy. There were still moments at night where I tried to avoid it, because 1 or 2 of them I could take on, but I knew if I had a horde of them, I would just be destroyed. And that's the way it should be. Yes, be OP and be a badass, but not overly too badass where the whole concept behind, the night sequence becomes, inert, becomes not worth doing. So the night moments was terrifying at first, but they eventually became less scary. And like I said, to the point where I was happy to go out and do missions at night and do extra sort of extra things, like, and the night missions were mainly like, go here, sneak here, grab these herbs because we need these herbs for this ritual, we need these herbs for this. So again, they weren't hard missions. It was just mainly like, go here, be sneaky, don't get seen, and collect these herbs. So I didn't mind doing them. They were like, again, it was more XP and it was more sort of extra bonus sort of things, because you get bonus XP for going out at night. So because I wanted to upgrade, I don't like having sort of one thing better than the other. I like to have like a level sort of things are as good as each other. I don't mind one level behind, but 2 to 3, then it starts getting my OCD high. So I have to I went up at night, and I found a spot I could go to where I wouldn't get seen or attacked by enemies, and I could pretty much parkour my way from building to building and still get the extra bonus XP for doing the parkour, so I could level that up so I could get it up high with my attack and my survival. Um, but yeah, the night moments, which is kind of the selling point of this game, were terrifying at first, but eventually they kind of got a lot easier. They were still scary, but I'm not saying they were bad moments, but they were generally the reason why I stopped playing for a long while. And when I got into it again, it was still scary, and it was still scary even when I was OP. I knew there were certain places that I shouldn't go to. I knew that there were certain like things that um again, like I said, one or two of them's fine, but if I get myself cornered or like that, because they're the volatiles, they're quicker than you. That's why you need to do the parkour. You need to know where you're going in the city, especially you need to know where you're going and where you are at night. And again, this is where it comes back into the world building, is that you need to spend your time during the day running around, looking around at everything, learning the buildings. Whereas if you jump off this building, where are you going to land? Are you going to land on another smaller building? Are you going to land on a balcony that take you inside of a building? Is there a window to jump through when you get into that building? So you need to learn the lay of the land before you really go out your way and be like, I'm going to sort of go out at night and I'm going to sort of do this, do that, and potentially getting chased and stuff like, you know what I mean? Um, so there were a lot of moments like that where it was generally like, I ain't gonna do the nighttime until I know where I got to do. And then when eventually I knew what I was doing and I became more OP, then I knew if I got chased, which I did many times, I know if I jump here, if I jump there, if I skid here, if I go there, I'm going to avoid being attacked. I'm going to avoid being killed, and that was the main um, point. That was the main draw of going out at night. And eventually I stopped doing the night missions because I didn't feel like I needed to, because I'd done all the reasons, like all the missions that I had to do at the night section I had done. So I stopped going on. I would just sleep the night away in the sleeping bag, and I would just do the day missions, because it just become, it wasn't that it was no longer fun, it just was no longer needed for me to do. But again, it was still interesting, kind of like it showed that I knew what I was doing. I understood the concept and the mechanics of the game enough where I felt confident to go out and brave to go out on my own at night, knowing that if I did get chased, I knew what to do. And that instilled in me some confidence. And that what again, that's kind of why you play these sort of games, is to grow that confidence, is to grow stronger, to grow better. And that's what I enjoyed about this game, and one of my favorite parts about it. But that's the gameplay. Like, that's the reason why I feel like you should play the game for, is just to experience the gameplay itself. It's the parkour, the crafting, all that. That's the reason why I feel like you should play this game, if anything. Like I said, the story itself is a bit meh, but the gameplay itself, the mechanics are where this game is its bread and butter. And again, why I feel like this game is so popular and why fans wanted so much for a sequel and to eventually get a sequel. And even though it took so long, it was because, from what I've heard, the designers wanted to focus on the animations, to focus on the parkour, to make it better, to improve, to take what the first game had and to improve upon it. Um, there is co-op in this game as well. I never experienced the co-op. I'm a very lonely gamer. As I've mentioned before in other episodes, majority of my friends, um, they moved on to like PlayStation and PC. So I play games on my own a lot. So there are moments where I have like one friend who I play co-op games with, but they don't really like much like really hardcore sort of zombie sort of games. Um, so I mostly play on my own, which is fine to me. So I didn't really get to experience the co-op, but I will say that from what I've seen other people playing co-op, and from my own experience of the gameplay, I feel like if I had a co-op buddy, either another friend or group of friends, I feel like we would have a laugh with this game. Especially just going around fly kicking zombies off roofs, that would be fun. Um, and like I said, I like to role play as well, so I'm sure that I'd role play like crazy in this game, mess around, be stupid, be silly, and again, that's kind of the point of games like this. You know what I mean? It's kind of the reason why you play co-op campaigns, is because even if the story's good or not, you're still going to mess around. Like playing through Borderlands, you would mess around, and you'd have a laugh and joke around and scream and shout at each other, as well as enjoying the campaign. Or even when you've got a game that the campaign itself is rather rather crap, because you're there with your buddies, with your friends, you kind of make up your own story as you go along, and you enjoy it a lot more. And again, that's just my experience with my friends, and seeing other people play that it's kind of the same with other people. So I never got to experience the co-op, but I would imagine it would be loads of fun. But overall, that's my experience with Dying Light. I wasn't a big fan of the story itself. The world building, both in narrative and gameplay function for setting the scene of what's going on, as well as it being perfect for the parkour system that's in there. I loved all that. Characters, not so much. Main character was all right, but he wasn't fantastic. The villain was, like I said, he was a wet blanket, wet paper towel. That there was no substance to him. There was no substance to any, in my opinion, to any of the characters. Like I said, it was a sponge cake with no flavor. Best way I can explain it. It looked nice on the outside, and the characters looked interesting and gritty, and the story, presents itself as being a very hard sort of incredible sort of epic story. It's not until you get into it you realize there's nothing to it, especially the villain. There's nothing to the villain. He's a one note. He's one big thing and that's it. um but the gameplay is where it's at, and like I said, that's the thing that is the reason why you should play this game, is just for the fact of experiencing the gameplay. When you first start playing the game, you might not experience it at first because you're still learning the parkour, you're still learning the crafting, you're learning um, how to fight zombies and how to basically avoid zombies if and where you can. And obviously, the nighttime is incredibly terrifying, especially when you're playing on your own. I'm sure it's terrifying with friends as well. Um, but there are sort of moments where, as you get better at the game, those moments become less scary, to the point of where you feel so overpowered and so badass that the game loses its scare factor and just becomes a fun romp in a zombie apocalypse. And that's what it did for me. So would I recommend this game? 100%. Yeah, I'd recommend it definitely. Either to play it on your own or to play it with friends. Both would be fantastic. Obviously, friends would be more fun, but if you can't, then by all means play on your own. Um, if I had to rate it out of 10, I would give it, for the gameplay on its own and for the world building, that's an 8. It's definitely an 8. Um, or even a close 8.5, maybe even a 9. But if I had to give it a solid number, I'd give it an 8. Um, as for the story itself, like I said, the story is a sponge cake with no flavour. So I'd say that's a 2 to 3. The story didn't sell me, and the side quests, though, the side quests are definitely where the most enjoyment is, and where I cared the most about certain characters. Even though there were side quests, there were moments where, like, um, some of the characters you only met once, and you helped once, and some characters you helped multiple times, and you could see their story evolve and what they get up to in the zombie apocalypse. And you meet them in new areas, and you get new quests for them, and you find out what they're doing and why they're there. Those bits were interesting. So the side quests, they would be higher up towards the 7 to 8 mark than the actual main quest itself. Um, so overall, if I had to give it an overall rating, I think on average, I'd give it. I think a safe bet would be a 7. It's still good. It's still great. Probably more fun. Like if I played it with friends, maybe it would be up there as being an 8 as well. But playing on my own, it's a fun experience, and I do look forward to playing the DLC. I look forward to going through the expansion. Everybody says that it's amazing, that it's really really good, and yeah, I just heard nothing but good things about it. So when I get around to it, you guys will hear about it first. And yeah, so let's go wrapping this up. Even though we've already wrapped it up, let's get round to the ending, shall we? And finally, the end. I know that I was getting quite nice. I was wrapping it up quite nicely in the last segment. You're probably thinking, well, Luke, why didn't you wrap it up and end it just? The reason being is because of these things that I want to sort of say, I want to mention before sort of wrapping up this episode. Firstly, number one, I'm going to take next week off. I won't be posting anything next week. The reason behind it is the fact of nothing bad, nothing major. even though I made it sound like it was bad or major there. Sorry about that. But last year I started writing a book. Well, I'd been writing this book for ages, but last year I properly sort of sat down and started writing it. And I had planned for this year to continue. But one of the things about doing a podcast is that even though I love it, and I do love it, but it does take a lot of time to do it. You know, when you have to think of topics and you have to plan out the topics and you've got to research them and you've got to um, write down notes and then you've got to record them. You know, it slowly starts to build up and a lot of time gets taken away from doing other things. You know, I'm an avid reader as well, and my reading slowed down this year with doing the podcast, which again, I'm not blaming the podcast at all. It's just the fact of, you know, it's a lot of sort of commitment to do this. So I've just planned that I'm going to take a week off next week. I might because I might do a video next week because the new Doctor Who episode comes out this week on the 17th of April. So I will be doing probably doing an episode reviewing that. So you might still hear off me, but you won't be getting the 2 episodes as normal. You might get the one, which would be the Doctor Who one. But yeah, I'm taking next week off, and then the week after, I come back and do a big sort of comeback sort of in force the week after that. I'd also sort of enjoy sort of the Easter break, Easter holiday, even though this week is the Easter break, Easter holiday. I know I'm doing it backwards. But I just wanted to let everybody know sort of that. So like, don't expect many videos or much engagement off me. Sort of the next week, mainly because I'll be focusing on writing and getting my story on my book sort of going again. And obviously, if you folks want to hear updates about how that's going, by all means, I'll happily do an episode talking about it. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to be doing next week. So just thought I'd let you folks know, just in case you were worried about me, you know, because you might care. But also, like, as I want to say, you know, again, thank you for everybody who was listening and who supported me for so long. Like I said it in my last sort of side quest. But for any of you that didn't listen to the side quest, there are things coming. There are plans in the works. I've got a designer, a friend of mine, working on a new image and like a new sort of brand rebranding for the podcast. Obviously, name staying the same, but having a new picture, new header, that sort of thing for my Twitter, as well as a new picture on here, on Spotify or Anchor, or wherever you're listening to this. So there's things there moving on, as well as other things that I'm doing that hopefully will benefit you folks in the future. I don't know when. Obviously, there's some that I can't talk about, mainly because I don't want to jinx it. But I do want to say things are coming, so there's things to look forward to. You know, things are evolving here, and like I say, it's just me doing this, so things are not going as quick as they would do if you had like a team of people or more than just myself. So I am trying my best. I am looking in getting the podcast being seen in a lot more places. I'm looking at Good Pods at the moment. They currently don't support my platforms that my podcast is on, but they're currently working on it. So one day I'll be on there, and other sort of things like that. So I am looking into it. So hopefully people will be able to hear my stuff in other places. But I just wanted to kind of give you folks an update as where I'll be next week and why I won't be here, and my plans for the future. There's a lot going on. There's a lot working on. And I feel like if I take that week off, I can sort of come round, figure it all out. So when I come back in force the week after, that, you know, I can talk about them a lot more clearer, have a better idea and understanding. And then sort of, it's just nice to have a break as well and come back refreshed and shiny and clean. So that's what I wanted to say. Just a quick update here at the end. Thank you for listening. If you're here, listen at the end as well. I hope you enjoyed this one as always. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Nerdstalgic _ pod. Or just type in Nerdstalgic and you'll see my happy, fiery face. And this podcast can be heard at any place where you get, well, I say any place you get podcasts. Currently, Spotify and Anchor. hopefully in the future more. But if you listen to this currently now, not in the future, you can find the Nerdstalgic podcast anywhere on Spotify and Anchor. Hopefully, if you listen to it in the future, you will know that we're in other places. Fingers crossed. But yeah, so if you play this game, let me know on Twitter. And as always, stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.